Thank you. And welcome to Junior Players Youth and Arts Panel, Create, Transform, Heal. I'm Rosara Cruz Webb, Executive Director for Junior Players. Today's panel is sponsored by the City of Dallas Office of Cultural Affairs with a media partnership from KERA's Art and Seek. Let's give them a big round of applause. Over our 62 years of existence, Junior Players has served hundreds of thousands of North Texas children and has provided these priceless experiences. We bring the arts to communities that often do not have access to them. Through partnerships with our school districts, local cities, homeless shelters, and public housing developments, Junior Players provides this much-needed exposure to free arts learning opportunities. The arts help guide our young people. They allow them to overcome. They build empathy, and they teach them that they are worthy of respect. Arts education programs are vital for their development. Today, we are honored to present our first inaugural Youth in Arts panel. This is an in-depth panel conversation about the community trials through the lens of our youth and how the arts can be a catalyst for a better city. Our goal is to provide a setting for our community to better understand our youth's perspective on relevant issues in our city like homelessness, racial divides, inclusion, and cultural equity. Through today's panel, our hope is to identify answers on how we can create art to transform lives, impact our city, and change our future with the help of our future young artists, innovators, and leaders. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy Saturday and investing in our city's most valuable resource, our youth. Now, I'd like to introduce our incredible moderators and panelists. First, we have moderator Clyde Valentine, Director of Ignite Arts Dallas, a center for people, purpose, and place at the SMU Meadows School for the Arts in Dallas. Next, we have moderator Athena Frizzell, Junior Players participant and panel council member. Then we have panelists Dhruv Iyengar, Junior Players participant and panel council member. Next, panelist Julianne Penjaboon, Director of the Arts Academy at the West Hampton Beach Performing Arts Center in the West Hampton Beach, New York. Then we have panelist John Hinojosa, Artistic Executive Director of SEIC in San Antonio. Then we have Lily Cabitu Weiss, Executive Director of the Dallas Arts District in Dallas. And finally, we have Miguel Solis, President of the Latino Center for Leadership Development in Dallas and DISD Board Trustee. And now I turn it over to you, Clyde.
Thank you, Rosada, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. You know, this particular process has been a real honor in that all of us have worked really closely with the Student Council to develop the themes and the subject matter that we're going to be exploring today. So this is an instance where we're really following young people, and I think we're going to get into those themes momentarily. I want to pass the mic quickly to my co-moderator, Athena, to get us going.
Hi, everyone. I'm Athena Frizzell. On behalf of Junior Players, we'd like to thank you all for joining us today. With everything that's currently happening in the world, I'm so grateful to seek refuge in discussions like the one we're about to have. Art and education are our human foundations. They go hand in hand, neither starting nor ending, but rather revolving. They float through and around us and serve as reminders to be humble, awake, and aware. Before we begin, I would like to invite you all to join in becoming an ensemble. All you have to do in order to achieve this is listen. Perhaps you will at first find that listening requires effort, more than simply hearing. Perhaps in your efforts you will forget to listen, which is okay. It's a skill that takes practice. Begin to try, and with it, practice curiosity and empathy. It's easy to disagree. It's harder to acknowledge. Try both. Approach doubts with respect and questions with kindness. Trust that differences in opinion only strengthen our ensemble if we are all willing to wholeheartedly engage. So, with that, we are going to start. Just jump right in. One of the key themes in this conversation is equity. So I would love for you all to define equity and what it means to you as human beings and educators, and how it influences what you do. Starting with Drew, if you wouldn't mind.
All right. I would always, when we were discussing this question, I would always laugh because it's such a heavy-handed question to just discuss. And I don't think that there's a right answer or like this correct definition of equity. I think that equity to me is representation where it matters. It's representation for all race, color, creed, sexual orientation, just representation in the art of dance, of music, of theater, anything. And being able to be your whole self in that and not being judged, not having any issues that arise because you are this person in this show, for example. I think that is what a small bit of what equity means to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with Drew. I was thinking about equity, and it's so funny because to me it boils down to two things: representation and access. So representation, I come from the perspective of theater, so I think I want to hear everybody's stories. What stories are being told on stage? From whose perspective are they being told? I think that's really, really important and a struggle that's still going on today. And then access, of course. Who gets to participate in the arts? Who gets to be an audience for the arts? And how do we ensure fair access for everyone?
Sort of echoing that, but the issue for me is about access for all. Cultural equity is about access for all, but more importantly, access for the marginalized and underrepresented historically. So it's about race, class, gender, disability, sexual orientation. It's about moving past this issue of the arts and culture being for the privileged, but being for all, and making sure that we open those doors and that people do have that access, specifically those that have been underrepresented historically.
Again, I absolutely agree. Having been in public education and now in nonprofit, it is about access. It's about representation. It is about moving and advocating our cultural policymakers wherever they are, whether it's board level or public school level or any other place, and I know we're going to get into this later, that we inspire that all people are represented.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I agree with my panelists, with my fellow panelists. I also think, though, it's important to define what equity isn't. In its most literal sense, equity is not equality. Equity is more. And I think historically, when we think about equity and we think about culture and race, it's important to understand that there have been marginalized communities for very long. And if we don't do more for those marginalized communities, we really can't have the progress that I think we're looking for. So for me, equity is not equality, it's more, and everything that our panelists have said.
Thank you all for helping to shape that. I can say that as we were meeting as a group and moving from equity, we moved into this fascinating conversation, and it's been a long time since I've been in high school, right? So to talk to these young people and have them talk about the quality of their instruction was really insightful. And that opened the door to this other question that we want to present to the entire panel, and we'll come back around. And these questions are also for you all. So picking up on this notion of more, right? Free of funding and resource restrictions. One of the things we started parsing out was, what does a quality holistic education look like? And how would arts education, figure into that overall quality or holistic education? So if you could be brief, each of you, how would you unpack or define what a holistic quality education for all would look like? And we can start with Drew and we can go back down the road.
All right. For me, it is the power to choose. I believe that all students should be given the power to choose what classes they take and when they take them. There are courses, of course, that are required by the state of Texas that you're supposed to take, but they're in both sides, from the STEM perspective as well as the arts perspective. You have arts students taking classes such as math that they don't necessarily like or want to take, and you have STEM students taking classes in fine arts that they don't want to take. And so I think that there should be some leeway when students are given that choice and they can choose what classes they can take themselves. However, I do understand that there is this, this general requirement for the state of Texas overall, and that is to ensure that everyone gets an education, that they can all have the same baseline foundation in. But I think a little more leeway should be given in that sense.
Yeah, I think for me, I think there's been this huge emphasis on STEM in recent years. So I run a program where we bring in children to see school day performances, part of their field trip programs during the year. And we've been struggling the past couple of years because parents, teachers are saying, the field trips that are important are going to Brookhaven Lab, which is a laboratory near us. There's this emphasis on science and math all the time, and I do think that's vitally important. There's no question about it. But we have to think in terms of STEAM, not STEM, and we have to get the arts back into this. And I think there's been this, as long as I can remember, this idea that the arts are optional. And, there were kids I went to school with who didn't do the arts, and we had to choose between business. I never took a business class in high school because I took chorus and drama. That's wrong. Those things shouldn't be optional. We should all participate in them, because then when we're adults, we all understand how important the arts are. We all understand how important business is, but we all have that understanding of those things. So it's not just the chorus kids and the theater kids who kind of grow up and stay in their own cluster, because that's what we're seeing now. And the other thing I would say, and this is just kind of secondary, but a holistic education should also include financial literacy. I think that that is really important. Being an adult and buying my own house and taking on student loans, I was like, where was this when I was in high school? So I think that's a huge part too.
This is a difficult question for me for a multitude of reasons, and I think that opportunity and choice, especially when it comes to students and young people creating their own path, I think the issue is that also young people, everybody learns differently, and what we have currently in our public school system is a model that doesn't look at that, and it's really disappointing. As an organization that works during the out-of-school time hours, we allow those choices to be made. We allow those students to make those decisions, and we actually do a really good job of assessing, and what we've shown is that by them making the decisions and the choices and doing the work that they want to do and taking those risks, the success rates have been pretty staggering when we compare them to the urban districts that we serve. The other problem also is that it's more of a systemic issue. Even we have to look at it outside of the state of Texas, because it's city by city, and there probably is not the perfect model. But Dallas has one ISD that is focused, right? The city of San Antonio has 17 different independent school districts in the borders of that city. And a majority of them are Title I, but then there are some richer districts as well. And they all have a different philosophy or perspective. And it's hard when you have those young people coming into our space having to struggle with that, depending on where their geographical location is and what their economic means are. So I don't know what the answer is, but it is a really sort of difficult question that we should be looking at and talking about. And the problem also is that in every district, some have the arts, some don't. Some have some arts, some don't. So that opportunity and access just isn't there. So I think, sort of getting back to the whole thread is that opportunity, access, and choice, and a different way of looking at how young people learn should be a model that we could sort of all commit to that would make sense, at least for the foundation work that needs to happen.
I think when you look at a holistic education, you really are looking at the whole individual child. Whether you're physical like I am, shouldn't be looked at as a discipline problem. It should be looked at, as John says, as the way I learn. So multiple options for faculty to not follow this rigid curricula that says you must be here now and you must be here now before you're tested. And because of those test scores, and we all know in the state of Texas and probably other states, but definitely in the state of Texas, it is my belief that we are over-testing our kids. So what we have failed to do, in my opinion, is really look at the individual. And I think when students feel like they're human beings and teachers believe that they can succeed, you've got a better start than where we are right now.
And yeah, I want to just build off of what you. We are not providing a true holistic education, and there are actually dates you can point to in American history where we started to move away from what was, I think, in some ways, a holistic education. The date for me that started it all was 1984. There was a report that came out issued by the Reagan administration called "A Nation at Risk," and it basically said if we didn't have a better sense of how to measure our kids in education, we were going to fall behind the Russians and we would lose the Cold War. So we said, let's try to standardize a whole bunch of things so we can get a sense of where our kids are. Now, look, I think people at that time, I think Reagan and his administration they were doing what they did for good reasons. But what it has become now is an education system that has led us to rote memorization, an education system that has created far too much an emphasis on testing, and we've begun to lose the soft skills that I think are necessary to really provide a holistic education for kids. So what do we need to do? We need to focus on things like social emotional standards, the soft skills that we all know are successful to be critical thinkers and to be well-rounded. Grit, determination, how to have a basic conversation with another human being. Those are things that I think are critical, and I can say that in the Dallas Independent School District, we are beginning to acknowledge this and beginning to try to shift this. And the best example I would point you all to, talk about equity as well, is Solar Preparatory All-Girls STEAM Academy. It's a K-8 academy for all girls, where they are looking at science, technology, engineering, arts, and the mathematics. We're teaching them how to be an effective human being in society, but also allowing them to grow as leaders and as citizens as well.
Thank you so much. On that topic of kind of using arts education in day-to-day life, no matter what path you go down, it's interesting how being an artist, you're kind of inherently a multi-hyphenate. You have to have these business skills and all of these different ways of thinking. But I wanted to ask Julianne, to talk a little bit about the power of theater for young people and how it helps developmentally and also for everyone. This goes for everyone, but if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Sure. And Miguel really started that discussion, but truly, the first thing that I do with my teen theater students is we do this exercise created by Sanford Meisner. It's called a repetition exercise. And they all have to stand and look at one another. They have to open their bodies up and be in a totally relaxed state. And they have to look at one another, and one person makes an observation of the other person. And the other person has to just take it in. They can't say anything. They have to take it in, and then they have to repeat it back to the person across from them. That's where important thing. You know, a lot of times with theater, we attract kids who like to talk and who like to be center stage, and that's great. But we have to teach them how to learn to listen, because that is the most important skill in theater study. I think that that makes kids better human beings when they learn to listen in a real way. We're also striving to be honest on stage. Honesty is a huge piece of it. So they're honest, they're listening, they become more empathetic because we're doing plays where they are putting themselves in other people's shoes. And I think we as a country have gotten really bad at that. And then, of course, there are the things that come along like confidence, self-expression, the discipline that comes with having to put on a show, memorizing your lines, knowing where to stand, working collaboratively, and then problem solving. You know, oh, this scene takes place in the sky. How are we going to make the sky exist on this stage, right? So I think that a theater education prepares kids for the kinds of jobs that don't even exist yet, right? We hear that everything's going to be automated in the future. Robots are going to be doing everything. So we better be preparing our kids to have those skills that robots will never have, those soft skills, those social and emotional skills. So I think theater is so important for that development.
For Drew, since you're other thespian on the stage, you know, I'm curious to have you talk about how that's manifested in your own life, because when we first met, you were like, well, I grew up in Chicago and I wanted to be a police officer. And then I moved to India, and then I wanted to get into bioengineering or bioscience, and now I'm getting my BFA in Ithaca as an actor. So for you, when you truly got bit by the theater bug and you said, this is what I want to do, what opened up for you as a human being? What did it unlock?
I think definitely there was a lot of what Julianne said, because that I was able to truly be myself on stage, which is something that I think a lot of people struggle with, and even I struggle with it, because you can't ever get it. And it's just a moment on stage where it's you and your scene partner, and you're talking and listening. And it's that moment of I'm right here with you right now. And at that moment, the audience goes away, and it's just you and that person, and you're being your best self to them, or your worst self, whoever you are as a character. But I think that for me, this arts thing opened up when my director at my high school gave me the opportunity to join the higher theater class, because I used to be a IB kid. I used to be in the school at Plano East for International Baccalaureate, and I dropped out because I wanted to pursue theater. Because the restrictions that IB would put on me in my time, I wouldn't be able to do theater full time. And because I dropped, I'm in a great theater class. I do technical theater as well, and I'm in my improv troupe, and I can do this. It's incredible, the opportunities that I've now gotten. It's opened me up as a person to understand more experiences, and it truly has made my life better.
Thanks. And then I'm going to bounce over to Lily real quick, because, you know, you have a storied career as an educator in our city. And I know there are countless young people that are grateful to you. And now you have this second life as the director of the Dallas Arts District. And I am really curious as to the skills that you've attained in the classroom and as an artist. How are they applicable in your new life and new career as a director of the Dallas Arts District?
I'm laughing, Clyde, because I struggled with that. Even when I decided when the Arts District came to me saying, would you consider applying for the position? All I've known really is the arts. And that's, as a young student, training, the discipline, the pain, because I'm a former dancer, the pain of it all. But out of all of it, it touched my soul in such a way that I could express myself. And just as Drew said, I became my best self. And I know that when I'm not involved with the arts, I'm not my best self. So when it came down to, Clyde, the drum roll, that I was offered the position, I literally stopped dead in my tracks thinking, am I prepared? Am I prepared to go from public education, which I've known for more than 4 decades, into a nonprofit world? And I know, because my life has been devoted to training kids, and I love the energy of kids, and it feeds my soul to get energy from kids. What's difficult is inspiring and getting that same kind of energy from adults. So, and I knew that was going to be my challenge, but at the end of the day, it's my sounding board is my husband. And I said to him out loud, am I prepared really to do that? And he said, I've watched you all your life, training, performing, everything about you. Every path you've taken has definitely prepared you. And many of you in the audience will know, I mean, luckily Miguel wasn't on the board when I was at Booker T. Arts Magnet, but many times I represented the faculty and advocated for the arts in Dallas ISD, and I have no fear in doing that. Many of you know I do like to speak my mind. I also, administrators included, they all know that is my MO, and now my board members do know that as well. But the question that I asked them, actually in the interview, is I'm a firm believer in access, arts access. Are you sure that that's really what you want from me? Because that's in my DNA. And when they said yes, I remind them of that periodically. Because that's a difficult thing to do. And I experienced this land that was Freedmanstown in Dallas when I first came in 1978. This didn't exist. We were all going to Fair Park to enjoy our arts amenities. So yes, I wholeheartedly believe that everything that these students learn in and through the arts prepares them for any job or any other passion that they will have in the future. They will be articulate, they will be passionate, and they will persist and persevere, and they will re-strategize until policies are changed.
Thank you so much. For all of you, I'm curious, through your positions, how do these young people have a voice? How are their voices heard? And for you specifically, how is your voice heard? And how does it provide, opportunity for advancement?
Well, I think something like this is how my voice is heard. Junior players contacted me after we held these meetings to try to discuss what exactly is cultural equity, and they were like, hey, we want you on the panel, and here I am. Because honestly, I was a little suspicious because you guys were going to talk about youths without anybody sitting here, but yeah, it's this. I think that the most important thing that kids and teenagers and just us, we forget to do is be involved and represent ourselves. And I think that we're the ones who make this change happen. We're the ones who go to rallies. We're the ones who vote. This is how our voices are heard. It doesn't matter how old you are, because if you're not old enough to vote, you're old enough to go to a rally. I think that the most important thing is to get out there and make yourself heard by doing anything that you can.
And if I can, I want to, all of you can tackle this, but I want to jump to John real quick because we talked about a couple of things. One was you gave an example of this group show you recently had in San Antonio, Less Than Equal. And then you said something really important last night about creating a safe space, for your youth to actually, so can you just unpack how that looks philosophically in your organization?
For sure. It's an important piece of who we are. It's sort of our core beliefs in the work. And so youth voice is obviously what our organization does and is about, but more importantly, it's about giving them that safe space to allow that voice to rise and being comfortable with that and having a community that allows you to take those kinds of risks and to have those kinds of perspectives. And that becomes really the more important piece of it versus youth voice. But in addition to that, the way that we've structured our work and our commitment is in the power of young people. And it happens both actually specifically created in formal and informal ways. And in the formal ways that we allow youth voice and their perspectives to be part of our work is that one of our core beliefs, one of our core philosophies is peer-to-peer and reciprocal learning. And what that means is that our teaching artists learn from our students learn from the teaching artists, but more importantly, students learn from each other. And so the way that we structure that both formally and informally is we have open studios. We have liaisons that are actually voted on by their programs to be the representative of their voice. But also it's just in the studios happening when you come on a daily basis. If you missed the intro to the project, you don't have to necessarily go to the teaching artist. You could go to your peer and ask, what did I miss, what's going on, or can you help me with this? The other piece of it is with the studio liaisons, they actually actively participate with our staff in determining programs and curriculum and structure. We also have a middle school program where we pay our juniors and seniors to be the facilitated teachers with our young people. And then our community-based programs called ABC Artist Building Communities, it is all facilitated by alumni who have stayed in San Antonio and to go to college, and then we hire them back to go out into the community and provide critical art services to a lot of marginalized communities and school districts, et cetera. So it's one of those things where I also mentioned, I think yesterday when we were I was talking to some young people today for lunch, and the piece for us too is that it's not just about, again, having that safe space and having also the voice. It's about adults actually making those ideas actionable. And so the way that we do that is that our students do a self-assessment twice a year, but so they not only assess themselves, but they also assess the program and the teaching artist and what they want to see and grow into our future programs. And then we take that information and we actually use it, and so it becomes part of our program planning. What did the kids talk about when we were in the film program, and what was it that they weren't getting enough in, but they'd like to get more in? And then what they see is, again, wow, my voice really does matter, and it is important. So those are sort of, I guess, some of the ways that we do it organizationally in the organization that are in.
Thanks.
Could I interject?
Sure,
really quickly?
sure. I want to make sure I get to Miguel and Lily too to talk a little bit about how that looks in the DISD system, and Julian. But yes, Drew.
Yeah. So I wanted to mention that I think that it should be a safe space where students should be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think that you should have the space to talk to those who don't agree with you. It should be a place where you can talk to them and they can talk to you and you can listen. And it can be both sides listening to each other. Otherwise, you're just preaching to the choir and it's just creating a sounding chamber. Because I think right now, especially in this current climate, everything is so partisan. And everything is either on one side or the very extreme of the other. And so you have this very, very large silent majority in the center who aren't making their voices heard. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah, so, from a DISD standpoint, I think we could do more. I think that we are beginning now to see a rise in student activism in a way that we've never seen before. And it hasn't necessarily been activism around curriculum, though there are this same feeling of we know we're not getting the education that we need, right? So for them, I don't know and this is what we want, but they're getting there. And they're very powerful. These kids are showing up to our board meetings more and more demanding equity. And we're having to assess the way that we make our decisions. So it's an iterative process, but it's heading in the right direction. From a professional standpoint, so it was mentioned earlier, I run an organization called the Latino Center for Leadership Development. Go to our website so you can learn a whole bunch more. I'm going to try to be brief with this, but it's latinocld.com. And we're growing the next generation of leaders, particularly in the areas of policy and politics, and particularly focused on people that can empathize with the Latino experience. Because as we become more and more Latino across the United States, we ultimately know that the Latino experience is inextricably linked to America's experience at large. And so we're trying to develop leaders that can do two things. One, learn to empower others to be leaders themselves, because that's true leadership, when you can just step away and you've created a whole bunch of other leaders to advocate for themselves. But the second thing is to empathize. And we work with young people. We just sponsored we're one of the major sponsors for the Mexico art exhibit at the Dallas Museum of Art, which is now in the record books for the second most attended exhibit behind like King Tut's exhibit in the history of the DMA. One of the biggest events that happened there that helped drive the numbers up was an event where people dressed up like Frida. And they came and they enjoyed the day, and they set a Guinness Book of World Record for the most people dressed up as Frida in one day. What people don't know about that is that the masterminds behind that were two young, undocumented dreamers. And basically, we said to them, and the Dallas Museum of Art said to them, hey, you have a really great idea. Let's give you the resources you need to be able to make this what we ultimately know it can be. I am a big believer, and our organization is a big believer in the power of the youth. When you think about American history, the big social changes that have happened in American history, most of the time have been driven by young people. Remember, it was a young woman who refused to give up her seat to move to the back of the bus. It was a young preacher who rallied people for the Montgomery bus boycott. It was young people that sailed across the Atlantic to fight fascism. Young people have made America what it is today. And if we don't listen to young people, we will regress. And so that's what we're trying to do at the Latino CLD, and I think it has a lot to do with how we keep this conversation about the arts going. It's going to have to be a youth-driven movement.
Thank you, guys. Julianne, Lily, you want to take a stab at this?
I think they've covered it. I mean,
Yeah?
John is my inspiration in
Anything
terms
we
of
left out?
student feedback, and I think we have it covered.
Cool.
I will say that I think adults need to do Julianne's exercise. I think we need to stand in a circle, our adult counterparts, and we need to describe one word, and we need to listen. We also need to do that with our students. And what I have found is, when you go along and you wear many hats, I was a much better listener as a teacher, would have to catch myself, than when I went into administration. And it was all because of time. and I think we have to pull back and allot the time.
One of my colleagues calls it slow down to see the system. You know, and oftentimes theater allows you, certain creative processes actually allows you, it may look like idleness, but you're actually slowing down to see the thing that you get to. So I have another colleague, Owen Lynch, professor of advertising at SMU, who says, statistics show us, but stories move us. So I'd like to hear, as we pivot, we're going to head out to the audience shortly, but I'd like to hear a story about how in your work you've seen something move, a young person, an idea. What comes to mind when I say stories move us? Because we know that the power of narrative is incredibly important to the work that we all do. But this is an opportunity to share something personal, hopefully, and deeply about each of your respective roles and work and missions. John, I saw something move.
So I have a lot of stories because we serve a lot of kids, and every one of their stories is vital and important. But it is about the narrative. It is about the focus, and I'll give you an example of something that's personal to me. Is that this is not a story of a student that's currently in our program. It's actually a story of an alumni that joined our program and was in trouble with the law, was going to an alternative high school. We do a sort of 3 strikes you're out kind of a deal. So you sign a contract to be in our program. You've got to fulfill your obligations. We have to fulfill ours. So there are issues with education, academics, et cetera, et cetera. And this was a young man who had so much trouble in his life that education wasn't a priority, but then his art teacher told him, you need to come and you need to go try to be in this program, SACE. And so because of sort of the issues that he was having in his life, he wasn't making his hours, he wasn't making his commitments. So then we said, okay, you're on a leave of absence. You're not going to be able to do this. It happened again, and then the third time, I said, Gabe, this is it, man. You're either in or out because we're not going to give you another opportunity and a chance. So he really sort of focused, and again, he did find his place, but again, his life was troubled and difficult. He ended up, again, becoming an alumni instructor, one of our mentors. He ended up going with his best friend, who actually came from a middle-class suburban district, to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and got his degree and ended up teaching in a creative youth development program, an out-of-school time arts program in Chicago. And I love to go to Chicago because I get to see him. But 4 years ago, I had a tragic accident when I was in Indianapolis, Indiana. I was supposed to be there for 36 hours, and I ended up being there for 4 weeks in the intensive care unit. I had a traumatic brain injury. And it was difficult, and I'm fine now, obviously. but it was, my family was panicked. They didn't know what was the issue. And Gabe heard about that, and he drove to the hospital that I was in. And he spent the weekend with me. And we made art. And we had conversations, and I got to know him even deeper. And at one point, he looked at me and he goes, John, you talk about changing lives with our program all the time, and what you need to know is you changed my life, you saved my life. And what was really great about that experience and that focus is that what he was doing was saving my life as well. So it's just something that, again, on a personal perspective, we have those amazing stories, but for me, it was like, it got me out of, I said, I'm going to get better. I'm going to move forward. I've got work to do. And it was him telling me that. It was sort of like he was paying me back in many ways because I think he knew that it was important for him to tell me that.
Thank you, John. Thank you for sharing that.
My story in theater, it started in 10th grade. However, I just finished Othello with Junior Players, and I think that show was the most rewarding show that I've ever been in. Because I love Shakespeare. I enjoy it immensely. But in my school, my parents were the only ones who saw my shows. We have many, many, many Indian family friends. However, they would always be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll come to the show. And it would be either they'd have conflicts or I wouldn't be able to get them there or something would happen. But this time, they were able to see Othello. This was the first show of mine that they'd seen me in. And being from a community that acting is a hobby. It's not really taken seriously. You're looked at as, okay, you're grown up, you're going to be a doctor, an engineer, or something like that, right? But I'm so fortunate to have parents that support me in my acting and who are letting me go to college to do this. And so after they brought family friends to Othello and I came home, my mom told me that, Drew, they could not stop talking about it. They said you were great. Think about how many hours of rehearsal he had in the sun, on the stage. I didn't realize it would be that big of a deal. I didn't realize that it would be such a performance. And I started tearing up because that's the first time that I looked at my mom and I looked at my dad and I was like, yes, I've made you guys proud in a way. As well as I think that going to an Indian family being like, and them having to ask you, oh, what are you doing in college? Oh, I'm acting. Interesting, you know? And then having them not go interesting, but wow, you're a good actor, do that. It really, you know, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you asked this because I think storytelling is the most important thing that we can do. I talk to legislators all the time, and it doesn't matter what party. If you can tell a compelling story about the transformative power of the arts, sometimes it's not easy. We know it's not easy to get them through the door to see a show, but if you can go and you can tell these stories, it's so powerful. There's so many, but the one that comes to mind, we're talking about equity and we talk about race and gender and sexual orientation, but we haven't really talked about people who are differently abled. And I have a young man in my program. I have a young man in my program who's autistic. And when he first came to us, we weren't sure. His parents were really nervous about him doing it. And we have a teen theater troupe that meets all summer long. And it's very much like a mix of scene study and acting technique, but also a little bit of drama therapy. So he did the program first summer, and it was hard to get him to kind of come out of his shell. And then the second summer, he came back, and he knew the space, felt more comfortable in it. And there were about 16 kids in the room. And we did this exercise where you had to leave a voicemail for somebody that you always wanted to, that you couldn't say something to, but you could leave it in this voicemail for them. And all the kids, they're teens, and they were like, oh, I don't really know everybody here so well, and I don't know if I want to do that. And this young man was the first one to jump up, and everybody was kind of like, oh, okay. So he goes and he sits down, and he leaves a voicemail for his father. And it was, Dad, I'm autistic, and it's okay. It's okay that I'm autistic. I know you want me to be more normal, but I can't, and that's okay. It's who I am. And all of us were just sitting there stunned. And all of the kids jumped up to their feet and gave him a standing ovation because he was so much braver than all of them. And that was a transformative moment. And he's gone on. He's a senior now, and he's got a job, but he's played leads in our productions. You know, he was Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. He's tremendous, and people are just enamored with him and enamored by him, and it's made such a difference in his life. And I see it in his father's eyes all these years later. You know, his father is really proud, really proud. So, yeah, that's a good one.
Thank you.
For me, I have to first start by saying that I have to admit that for many, many years, I've been ignorant when it comes to the power of art, and particularly the power of performance art. But there was a point not too long ago where I very clearly understood the power of narrative and the power of performance art. Again, going back to my work with the Latino Center for Leadership Development, one of the things that we tried to do is elevate the stories of dreamers, of undocumented children who have been in this country literally since infancy. They know no other country but this country, and yet our immigration laws will not allow them to be citizens. They ultimately will end up paying taxes here. They get an education. Many of them are extremely hardworking, and so I wanted to try to get a better sense of their experience. And we are blessed to have a founder of our organization who emphasizes the need for art and to tell these narratives. So we sponsored a play, Deferred Action. And I went to the play, and as I walked in I think it's the building, maybe the building next door. Next door. I walked in, and I saw hundreds of young dreamers in the room, ready to watch a story that was unique to their experience in America. They could see their faces, their narrative. And after the play was over, first I was completely wowed because, it really does strike at the heart of the issue. But what was the most impressive was seeing the impact that play had on them. Some of them, you could tell, were proud. They got, for the first time, they felt like they got to walk out of a room and people knew the struggle. They knew what they were going through, and they understood what needs to happen moving forward. The other thing was seeing tears in their eyes, because finally, someone is recognizing their story. Finally, someone sees the value in them as people and in their story. And at that point, I said, okay, I get the performance art thing, right? But I also get the power of narrative and how there are still far too many communities in America who don't have their story told, who don't get the opportunity to go see themselves on that stage. And so it served also as a catalyst and a motivator to say we need to continue to do this work. We need more stories. It needs to be diverse. We need to promote equity. And there's no better way to motivate others than through the power of narrative and performance arts.
So I'll round this out, and I'll try to be brief, which is not really in my DNA.
Well, you have a few stories to tell since you've been at it for a little while.
I'm going to talk about two things, and Clyde knows because we've served on many of these panels, I think, in the past year. So to go off of what Miguel says, and probably the people in the room know that I will probably cry, but I know that firsthand. Because early on, when my parents came, my father came to the United States. It's a very interesting path because he was undocumented. He came over with his older brother on a ship to the U.S., and he worked as a migrant worker. And the only time that he could become a U.S. citizen was in the war. And we needed soldiers to help fight. And so they started a Philippine brigade made up of, again, undocumented Filipino men. And it wasn't until he was stationed in the Philippines that he met my mother. And with that brigade, after the war, they granted that entire brigade naturalized citizens of the United States. So at that point, he could become legal. So my situation goes back to probably, I've taught so many kids, so it's probably almost 2 decades ago. And we brought these 2 students to, they actually appealed to us to accept them, look at them again in an audition, and we accepted these 2 students, not knowing that they were undocumented, brilliant, brilliant potential students of promise that had so much passion that by their senior year they were being offered scholarships. So when I would follow up as a teacher and say, have you applied? Do you need help? The story came out. And they couldn't apply to certain places at that point in time because they would have to reveal they were fearful that they would find out that their parents were undocumented and they would send them back and be deported. So there was only one conservatory at that point in time that understood about undocumented students, and that was our counterpart at New World School of the Arts. So I was able to make that connection, and one of them was able to go on scholarship. Unfortunately, the whole point of that is, yes, I could get them in, but I couldn't provide the resources to get him to finish. He is thriving now and certainly working, and I am so proud. But at that point, I vowed to myself that that cannot happen again. And here we are. Here we are, and I know that my dad's probably smiling right now because I, like you, Drew, told everybody and his friends when they would say, where are you going to school? And what are you majoring in? Well, yes, I have a scholarship to Texas Women's University, and I'm majoring in dance. And the frowns kind of, oh, it's such a surprise. But at no point did my parents doubt that when I said, I need to do this, did they ever argue with me? Why? Because they were dreamers. And dreamers make things happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Oh my goodness. Those are all beautiful stories. It's the power of theater and arts in general. I think it's so often there's basically when you see something in a different way, I think a lot of people see theater in a different way rather than what it is, which is this powerful, source of dreams and life and love, So thank you. We're going to open it up to the audience for any questions that you may have for all of these wonderful panelists.
And we're going to ask that you stand. There's 2 mics on either side of the house. There are lights on them. And just a friendly reminder that Art and Seek is live streaming this right now. Shout out to Art and Seek, which is why we want you to talk into the microphone. And don't shy away from stepping to the mic and asking a question or sharing a comment. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mason Munkelman. I am a stage manager for Junior Players and a student at the University of Texas at Dallas. Thank you all for being here today and for sharing your stories and for representing youth in our community. I have a little preface, and then I suppose my question is trifold. So I moved here from Wisconsin, and I absolutely adore it here. But something Wisconsin has that I have not worked for, but that I like to advocate for, is a company called The Proud Theater. And this is a theater for 14 to 18-year-old students who are LGBT+, who are able to devise theatrical works and dance and movement and create within a space with their peers and with advisors and technical crew who are able to empathize with them. And any crew well, all of the crew, goes through awareness training so that they know how to help these students and so that they know what to do when problems arise that are very specific to them. And I think it's beautiful that this theater does this. And the University of Texas at Dallas also does this. They have safe zone training through the Gallerstein Gender Center to allow faculty, staff, and students to develop awareness of how to handle having LGBT students in their classroom and how to help them and help them prosper. Because LGBT students drop out of college so frequently, and they drop out of high school so frequently. So I guess the three folds of my question are, do you believe in the power of these awareness trainings? Do you utilize these types of training within the facilities that you have access to? And what do you believe can be done to develop types of training for things beyond gender and sexual orientation, for race, for culture, and for other unrepresented and underrepresented demographics? Thank you.
Woo! Who wants to take the stab at that? Thank you.
So we're going to start with the easy ones first, and then we're going to... Well, let me start. First off, thank you for sharing your personal story. It's very powerful. Again, another example of strong narrative. So in Dallas ISD, I am proud of the district that the district stance on inclusion, on ensuring that we have awareness of diversity trainings. Can we do better? Absolutely, but I think when it comes to large urban districts, we're probably on the forefront of making sure that we have inclusive policies. We passed a non-bullying policy back in, I think, 2011, and ever since then we've been building on that. I personally have been trying to work on doing a few things. So the district that I represent, District 8, has the highest concentration of LGBT population in Dallas, and so I work pretty closely with an organization called the Resource Center, which has been very helpful in both educating me about issues related to the LGBT plus community, but also pointing me to resources. And so one of the things that we're actually working on right now is, working on with the Chief of Staff, is to actually have an LGBT plus liaison in DISD who can work with both LGBT plus students and staff to help them ensure that they have the resources that they need. And that they can build a community amongst themselves, a support community, and at the same time ensure that everybody else understands LGBT, undocumented, African American, Asian, whatever, we're all the same, man, we're all the same. So that's what we're trying to do in DISD. Now, as far as the idea of where this organization and their training, I would like to make a personal commitment to you that I'm more than happy to get with you after this, kind of get a better sense of what they offer, because that's something I think that sounds pretty unique and something we could implement in Dallas ISD. And lastly, your voice is needed today. Texas is on the front lines of issues related to protecting civil rights for the LGBT plus community. I'm not going to go off on a political tangent, but I will say I think it is absurd that we are having a conversation about bathrooms when it comes to education versus funding. So I want you to know, and I want the community to know, both the LGBT plus and our community at large, Dallas ISD stands with you. We have made it very clear where we stand as it relates to this bathroom bill. Luckily, the special session is done and it's not moving forward, but it will come back and we will fight it again, but we need your voice at the table as well.
Thank you. Drew, you have something to say about this?
Just a little.
I want to make sure we
blurb.
get to the folks that are out there, but yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that that these issues that we're facing with the LGBT plus community, that every single day it grows larger. You gain more allies, you gain more people who support this cause, and so, like Miguel said, it's our voices that are going to make this change. And I don't think that the LGBT plus community is going anywhere anytime soon. So it's up to us to really push the envelope on that issue.
So if we can go to this side, then we'll come back over here. Yes?
Okay, sorry, I'm pretty sure. Hi, my name is Stacey Guillen. I just wanted to thank you all for your time and your wisdom and your knowledge. It's been very, very empowering. I'm not going to lie to you, I was tearing up just hearing your stories. I'm a healthcare professional, and as the tagline shows there, arts creates, transforms, and heals. And John, when you told me or told us your story, it kind of struck a chord. Coming from a healthcare background, a lot of healthcare systems are integrating arts into healing. In fact, Baylor, Scott and White, has an arts as medicine program where in the cancer department, we use the arts to heal our patients, to empower our physicians, our providers, to bring happiness to the lobbies. Similarly, I'd like to hear your story of how we integrate or utilize the power of art for our youth in mind, body, and image, and healing, especially living in an ecosystem where social media, you have to be validated and children are bullied. I'd like to hear more about how the art has healed and transformed our youth in our city.
Thank you. That's, I think, for anyone, including you, Athena, if you want to. John, or?
Well, I can talk again. This isn't my city. It's an amazing city, but I live a few hundred miles south. But in another great city. But for us, again, it's about those safe spaces and those safe places. Our community-based programs actually go into hospitals and work with students on dialysis or having cancer treatment. And it's actually changed the scope of our community-based programs, and it's changed the scope of the way that we work with those arts, because they have some restrictions that normal students in a regular classroom don't. So it's sort of transformed our thought process on that. The other piece for me, again, about sort of the whole child and again, for us, it's about building those communities. And so when you talk about LGBTQA or plus and our students that are transitioning from one gender to the other, or kids that have autism, by giving them that space and to that comfort, and then to know that there's a community that supports them. So we do that in a microcosmic way at SAC, but it should be something that we should all be doing in all of our systems, right? It's something that giving them that opportunity to feel safe and confident and know that they have allies and people that are going to support and work with them. We spend a lot of time thinking about that and providing professional development for our teaching artists and our administrators as well, just because it's an important key, because we have to look at it as, again, a whole versus just a part.
It's safe to say that one of the reasons why the NEA funding was preserved this year was because there's a tremendous amount of bipartisan support, and in particular with the Department of Defense, they're utilizing more arts and culture in addressing the PTSD problem, right? So they're finding it more effective to work with veterans who are suffering from PTSD to kind of get them to make paintings or write poems and just practice, movement. And so that's growing, I think, and changing. So I'm not answering your question directly, but I do think that there's a shift and a growing understanding of kind of the role of arts and culture. Another point to this is the Surdna Foundation commissioned a study and out of 2 neighborhoods in New York City, in Brooklyn specifically, and they created this index. They were able to create this index around well-being, right? And what they were able to correlate is that a greater sense of well-being, and this is about the health of communities, like, how do you feel when you're walking through your neighborhood or moving through where you live, is tied to the amount of cultural assets that actually exist in that particular neighborhood. So where there was a low kind of a cultural asset index, there was a lower sense of overall well-being, you know, and where there was high, and by cultural assets, it was very broadly defined. Libraries, churches, art centers, galleries, like it ran the gamut, right? But I think it speaks to just this growing sense of moving from STEM to STEAM, knowing that arts really is about the fabric of our lives more than just something to enjoy as a luxury. Athena?
I think on the subject of being a young person with social media and the pressure and mental health and body image, one thing that theater has helped me with, just in general, is seeing your body as a way to tell a story. You can be a single person on a stage and in front of an audience and tell a story. Like the power in that over what other people look like, what other, who other people are, on this surface level can be translated to, being out in the world and having conversations and seeing people eye to eye. It's just a really wonderful thing to incorporate into, our lives on a level broader than, in a classroom, wherever you may be.
Adding on to that, I think that theater is what makes a lot of kids comfortable with their bodies, and especially for me, I used to be this little chubby kid right out of middle school who then went into high school and he stayed chubby. But I did theater and I was comfortable with myself, with my voice, and I wouldn't like be upset anymore with the way I looked or the way I talked or the color of my skin. And so I was very comfortable with who I am and what I was doing. And I think that is attributed to theater.
Let me add just a couple of things. One is theater is important, but so are all the arts. As an organization that is multidisciplinary, that has visual arts, film, theater, new media, and game design, it's important in all of those sort of contexts. And it's powerful. And the other term the term that we use and that is being used a lot to talk specifically about the question that you initially posed is it's called the healing arts. Mm-hmm. That's the term when you're working in the arts, again, about sort of looking at a well-rounded sort of healing opportunity for young people and all people.
Well, thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I want to go. I think there's a few other people on this side, so step into the light. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Savannah Youngblood. I am in Metamorphosis, and I was in Othello this summer, and I've just started working with junior players. Hey, Drew. And really quickly, before I ask my question, I just want to say to Lily, thank you so much for sharing your experience. As a young Filipino woman, it's super empowering for me to see Filipino women being leaders and artists. I can't even begin to explain how represented I feel like right now. Yes. And my question to everyone, or whoever wants to answer, is speaking on storytelling, how has the current political climate informed and shaped the stories and art you want to make and the stories you want to tell, basically? And how has that shaped the collaborative process that you have with the youth that you work with? And I guess, what are your experiences in that realm of telling stories and using theater to heal?
I recently directed a production of Top Dog Underdog at my school as part of the Senior Directs Festival. And I thought that show was an incredibly topical show to do, just based on the political climate, just because you're looking at two young black men living in an urban society with barely any money, and they're conning people, or one of the brothers is conning people to try to get by, and the other one has straightened his life out. So you're looking at the dynamic of two brothers. And I think that that story is incredibly relevant today, just because that you could necessarily, you wouldn't apply that to every single American out there, but you could look at this story and be like, wow, that is an incredibly apparent American story, because you're looking at these two brothers who have faced oppression, who have faced poverty, and this is given in the script, and they are trying to do their best to make a living and go day by day. And so, now, I don't know what point I was trying to make with this, but
you answered the question, and that is, you chose that play, right? That was a choice that you made.
Personally, yes, I chose that play.
That's great. Julianne?
For me, and I had the privilege of spending some time with Savannah this afternoon, and we were talking a little bit about this, but for me, I work, I'm on the east end of Long Island, and my students are primarily white, and this has been a really challenging year in terms of helping them to understand what privilege is, helping them to understand that these are difficult conversations and it's going to make them uncomfortable, and that's okay. And that's been really central to my work this year. We went on a field trip into the city, and I mentioned this on the call, and we saw a Broadway show with no representation, and it was completely inappropriate that there was no representation. And we talked about it the whole way home on the bus, and the kids, they just had no sense of their privilege, and it was a real kind of watershed moment for me to realize that, and then it inspired me to do more of that work. Because it's no one's responsibility but ours. I've been seeing all this stuff on social media of, oh, please, Black community, tell us how we can help, what we can do. It's not the Black community's responsibility to educate white people on what to do. It's our responsibility to do the research and not just throw around the word ally without some action to back it up. So that's what I'm working on. Try it.
I want to add on to that I use my platform as an actor to now represent my culture and Indians, because you don't see many Indians on Broadway in New York on a stage. You have Jafar in Aladdin right now being played by a white guy in brownface on Broadway. What? You have people like me in this industry trying to make a living, and you still pick a guy and you put brown face on him. And so you pick an Aladdin who, it's now played by Telly Leung, who is Asian, but he's not of Middle Eastern or Indian descent. What is the point of this if we can't be represented? Right? And so,
thanks, Drew. I think there's a few other people I want to make sure we get to on this. It's an important question, and I know it's a heated. Does anybody else want to address this young sister's question?
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief. I know that there's lots of great questions out there. For us, it's sort of the opposite. For what happened on Election Day for us, because most of our kids are marginalized and undocumented and DACA students and transitioning. We had kids in tears when the election happened, and because they didn't know what the answers were, they didn't know what to do, and we had, again, amazing teaching artists working with them. But we have a student meeting every Monday, and I can't remember, it was a Tuesday when the election happened, I think, and I said, we're going to hold an emergency student meeting, and I got them all, we always stand or sit in a circle and have the conversation, and what I said is, I don't want to take away some of your studio time, because you have work to do. But I want to remind you all about the power and the place that we have here, and that you are always going to be accepted, and We have to build and grow that in order for us to move forward. And more importantly, I want to remind you about how powerful art is. And it's a system changer. It happened in the civil rights movement. When you hold a mirror to what's happening in the world and you tell that story, then you can change things. So I said, now get back in your studios and make some good art, because we have that, you have that power, and you have that place of belonging here.
I will just say one quick statement on that. Just when I think the world is a bit hopeless, because I've taught for so long, I am revived by an email that one of my graduates reached out to me that is a senior right now at a university here in Dallas. And actually, you're going to all know which university, because she is double majoring in dance and human rights. And so when she reached out to me, it was really on the subject of the transformative nature of speaking through the art about human rights. And the dialogue that she wanted me to have with her department chairs and her primary professor was, how can we make this happen in the Dallas Arts District? And so that inspired me, again, to provide access to this amenity in the city of Dallas and still be able to speak through the medium that I know so much about, and that is art, and do it in a very positive way. So we began to have the conversation about which institutions would be open to this. And because I know this student, I said, once you have all your ideas, then let's look at it and narrow the scope a little, because I know you're going to bite off more than you can chew. But it is that conversation. That's how you start change. You network with the people that you know believe the same things and won't say no. It's saying yes to an opportunity to express yourself.
And I briefly, it's a beautiful question. It's a great question. And I truly believe we are at an inflection point in American history. And American values and traditions are being tested by the leader of this country pretty much every day. So narratives are absolutely important, and history is important. And so I think it's important that we call things out, that we make sure that we're telling the right history of America, that we learn from it. And there are narratives to be told in that history, two particularly, that are happening, pretty consistently. One is, first, I don't think it's okay for a young black or brown boy or girl to have to walk into a school named after Stonewall Jackson or Robert E. Lee. We don't talk about the difficult changes that I personally think should happen when it comes to our history. But oddly enough, we are now, because these values are being changed. And the other one is the story of immigration. America is a country that was founded by immigrants. Bobby Kennedy once said, there's one precious possession that we all share in this room, and that's the name American. It's not easy to know what that means, but in part, to be an American means to have been an outcast, to have been a stranger, to have come to the exile's country, and to know that he who denies the outcast, the stranger, or the exile amongst us today, they deny America. So we need to continue to tell the stories of our history when these values and these traditions are challenged, because that's the only way we can truly resist and ensure that this inflection point is a positive one and not a negative one that takes us back to dark times.
Thank you so much. And I have found that it's massively impacted the stories that I seek to tell, but also the stories that I want to find. Like, I am very motivated to find stories that are not in, curriculums by women, people of color, LGBT plus community. I think it's important that we honor them in this time and use their stories as kind of fuel for ourselves. So thank you so much. That was a wonderful question. All of your answers were.
And, we're going to go over here.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sasha Moreno, and I am a former dance theater major turned attorney. And I say that for a few reasons, because I think you guys have touched on different points of my question. Growing up as a dance and theater major, I also got the looks, and I was also told that I was never going to make money, that I was going to be a starving artist, and I needed to change my career. And so it's a twofold question. My first question being that how can we start changing that narrative that being in the arts is not a bad thing, and that it's something that we should support and encourage our young students to pursue if that's what they're passionate about. But at the same time, too, also from the arts community, how can we also potentially encourage our art students who maybe aren't sure pursuing a full-time career in the performing arts, hopefully hone those skills for something else. So I wouldn't be the attorney that I am now if I didn't have that experience on the stage to feel confident in who I am and having that public speaking ability. And so the second part of the question is, how can the arts community really help encourage the students hone in on potentially their skills that can get them to another level in a different career where they really will strive and flourish?
Thank you.
I'll take one part of that question, and actually I know my fellow panelists will take other parts, but I will speak about the trends right now. And what we have found is you cannot just teach, artists can't just train in their art form. As John will say, his organization is multidisciplinary. So when you look at that, you also have to look at the business. You have to treat art as a business. And that in itself gives it credibility. So if artists understand that they're going into this as a self-employed business, and that you have certain skills that you need to amass in order to market yourself and gain the kind of visibility that you want, I think that is where the trends are going. Without entrepreneurship and art together, I think you're going to find students just wavering on what to do. Is it wait tables? Is it do art? Whatever that is.
If I could just echo that, at the Meadow School of the Arts, we have our students coming in immediately thinking about themselves along those lines, and we have a robust arts and entrepreneurship program. So we make sure that they're thinking about all of those other skills, those soft skills around their particular disciplinary practice. So communication, understanding what your time is worth, right? All of these critical sort of, the ability to like even have that conversation with someone when they want to book you for something. And we also have, and this is, we see this trending quite a bit with our incoming students, a lot of double majors, right? So dance and, theater and I can tell you that it's already incredibly rigorous, but they're doing the work. So they're not shying away from that load and that particular responsibility on both what, you know, their discipline and then that additional major. So I know we're out in front of that because it's critical to a longer productive practice in life.
Answer to your first question is something that we get all the time from our parents is, oh, you know, we're going to let them do this, but what are they going to do for a living? Where are they going to go? And the story that I always tell, and it's a story that we should all tell, and it's about the power of the arts and how we don't look at it, how we have this perception, but what I always tell parents when they ask that question, as I said, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, the arts are filled with your life, creativity and innovation. The bed you slept in was designed by somebody. The house that you sleep in, the car that you drive, the music that you listen to, the glasses that you wear are all creative people making money. And so if you, everything that you incorporate in a daily basis is the power of creativity in the arts. So that's a simple one for your first one. The second piece of it is, again, the term that we now use, it's a new term, but it's a term that's been happening for a long time, is the focus that we have is creative youth development. So the arts and creativity at the central core of the work that we do, but youth development and how to be a whole citizens for the rest of your life and how to understand what budgets mean and how to have conversations and discussions, social emotional sort of perspectives are the things that we teach in our programs. And the thing that I love too is that so many of we keep track of our alumni and do a good job of reaching out to them and making sure that they came back and check in with us as well. So many of our alumni are artists, but doing other things with that art. And there's something really powerful about that. You know, if you do really want to be a working artist, you have to be smart. You have to be a PR marketing person. You have to understand what budgets are. You have to have entrepreneurial skills and the creative talent to make that happen. That doesn't happen for a lot of folks in the real world. But, you know, I told the story yesterday is that one of our alumni who got his Bachelor of Science degree, was working as an alumni instructor and was our administrative assistant, came to me a month ago and said, John, I've been working on my teaching certification, and just to let you know, I'm applying to schools to be able to teach, and I'm going to lead a letter of recommendation, right? And of course, he got hired. And so the really cool thing is that I talked to the principal who had hired him, and he said, you know, Gerardo was talking all through our interview about art and sort of this power that it has, and we're going to hire him as the physics teacher for our high school program. And I told him, use the art every day. In your, so Gerardo is now teaching physics in high school and incorporating the art that he learned in the work that he did with us. So that's kind of exciting, right?
So I think we actually ended with STEAM, kind of, which is pretty great. I know we can keep. We knew we were going to be short on time, y'all, and out of respect to JP and Devon in particular, who's our stage manager, and we, you know, there's a changeover because Metamorphosis at 8 p.m. Respectfully, out of time, I have to just honor the fact that we cannot take any more questions. I'm sorry, and we do have to close out. So I could thank you, John. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you so
Drew.
much.
We're going to be in the front, right, after this? So if you have other questions.
Yeah, I think we'll be outside after this, so you can approach any one of us. And I'm going to pass it over to Rosada.
And thank you all.
Yes, thank you guys so much for this insightful, prevalent, and honest conversation. Thank you for taking the time. We do have a small token of appreciation for you. Yes.